But you believe that there's a whole constellation of underground bases built by the U.S. government in the United States.
So that was Tucker Carlson, and during his interview, they're talking about deep underground military bases. And so this is not a new concept. I'm sure many of you guys are already aware that they exist, but that's what we're going to be talking about here because they are talking about it there. And I thought it was interesting because we can apply some biblical applications to the idea of deep underground military bases. But just so you guys know, this has been around for a long time. What we see above the earth is different than what is going on below. And so the idea of underground military bases, it's not just here in America, it's all over the place. There are cities underground. It's crazy. And so this is what's the reality of our world is. And it's interesting when you start trying to pay attention to what the Bible says about it. But before we talk about what the Bible talks about in regards to caves and mountains and stuff like that, I think it's good to know and remember that Mr. Musk has a company called the Boring Company, and this is where they have tunnels that are tunneling underneath the ground that are basically creating roadways to for Tesla vehicles. In Revelation chapter 6, we are told about the sealed judgments. Now, it's important to understand that it's the sealed judgments that begin the tribulation period, the 7 years of tribulation that will happen on the earth. And so with that in mind, what's interesting about Revelation chapter 6, which is where we are, at the end, after the first 6 seals are given, we are told that the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave and every free man, hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains. And so this is really interesting because they go in there and it says, and they said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand? And so you're given a whole bunch of information here in Revelation chapter 6, but what I want to focus on first is how they go into the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and they are trying to hide. They're trying to escape. And so it's interesting that John on Patmos is giving us all of this information about a future event, and he's describing how people who are alive during the tribulation period are going to run into the mountains to hide. And so the question is, why in the world, like, what does that even mean? They're running to the mountains and in caves and stuff like that. Well, when you apply the deep underground military bases, the whole visual that you have on those pictures that we just viewed there, and you apply it to this, it seems to be connected because there's going to be the great men, the rich men, the commanders, all the mighty men. They're all going to run in there, and you're going to have the common people too, like soldiers who actually are posted in these military bases, and they are going to basically try to get away from what's going on outside. And so they're building and preparing for a time like a very, very serious global event, and this is they think that they can escape it by going underground. Now, with all that in mind, when you connect Revelation and how they hide in caves, if you go to the book of Joshua, what you'll find is that Joshua parallels the book of Revelation in many different ways. Because also in Joshua, you have other kings who also went and hid in caves. You also have Joshua who is trying to get back the land, just like how Jesus is also going to get back the land. You also have walls falling down in Joshua, and you also have walls that are going to fall down in Revelation. There's a whole bunch of parallels that are really, really neat. But one of the things that many people think is that the church is going to go through the first 3.5 years of the tribulation because they don't think that the sealed judgments are considered wrath. And so they think that we're going to go through the first 3.5 years with the idea of the first 3.5 years not being God's wrath. Well, if you look in Revelation chapter 6, the people who are on the earth during that tribulation time, during the first 3.5 years, what they acknowledge is that it is his wrath, because that's what they say. They say the people who are on the earth during these sealed judgments, which will occur during the first 3.5 years, they say, for the great day of his wrath has come. So the people who are alive during the first 3.5 years are acknowledging that whatever is being unleashed onto the earth is actually going to be God's wrath. And so since they acknowledge it as God's wrath, I think it's important that we do too. And so the whole 7 years is wrath. And so I personally believe that we will be out of here. I believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. And I think that we will not go through his wrath. And so you can pull from multiple verses on that if you would like to, but that's just a secondary issue at the end of the day. But this connection that we have here of people going and hiding in caves is what is already being introduced into our world in a very large way, because there are already people who are stationed underground, and you have a whole bunch of reports to it. And so when you see somebody like Tucker Carlson talking about it and bringing it back to view, or on the forefront of our minds, it's really interesting how if you watch his video, you'll see that they talk about energy, and they're like, well, how do they do this? How do they do this? All these questions that we don't have the answers to. We don't need to know the answers, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that they have that we have no idea about. And so it doesn't matter, because we are not here to be a part of their system. We are supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. And so I think it's really important to keep our eyes on Jesus during these times, because it seems like the world is getting really dark, but we need to be telling people about Jesus as much as we possibly can, because a lot of lines seem to be converging prophetically. And so when they actually converge, it seems like that is when the rapture is going to take place. And I believe that we're in the last seconds of the last days. And so we need to keep our eyes on Jesus more so than we ever have been before, especially if you believe what I just said to be true. So I hope this helps. Thanks.